It was a quiet morning in Greenville, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone and scandal seems like a faraway notion. At Greenville High, the day had just begun. Teachers shuffled into classrooms, students filled the hallways with chatter, and Principal John Williams stood at the entrance, greeting them with his usual warm smile. To the outside world, he was the picture of success, a man of authority, intellect, and charm. Parents trusted him with their children, and students respected him for his dedication to their education. But beneath the polished exterior, there was a crack small enough to escape notice, yet deep enough to bring everything tumbling down. Emma Brooks was among the students who passed by that morning, her head high, her bag slung over one shoulder. At just 17, she exuded the kind of confidence that came with youthful ambition. She was in her final year, dreaming of the future, a college acceptance letter, a career as a writer, and a life far beyond the confines of Greenville. Emma wasn't just another student. She was the kind of person teachers remembered long after graduation. For Emma, high school wasn't without its challenges. She'd lost her father a few years prior, leaving her mother to raise her alone. His words were steady and reassuring, the kind of encouragement Emma had been craving. Soon, the meetings became regular. He'd call her to his office between classes or after school, always under the guise of helping her with her plans for the future. Emma thought nothing of it at first. She admired him, respected his intelligence, and felt grateful for the attention he gave her. She didn't notice the subtle ways he started to cross boundaries, the compliments that lingered a bit too long, the personal questions that veered too close to her private life. John Williams was careful. He knew how to keep his actions in the gray area where nothing seemed overtly wrong. He never touched her, never said anything that could raise alarm, but he was grooming her, inch by inch, word by word, drawing her into his world without her realizing it. Emma began to trust him more than she trusted anyone else. When she had a bad day, she went to his office. When she was overwhelmed with schoolwork, he offered to help her organize her time. He made her feel special, like she was different from the other students, like she mattered in a way they didn't. But trust, once given, can be dangerous. And Emma had no idea that the man she trusted most was leading her toward a path she could never return from. The weeks turned into months, and their meetings grew more frequent. Emma found herself looking forward to their conversations, feeling as though Principal Williams understood her in ways no one else did. For her, it felt safe, a connection built on respect and guidance. But for John, it was something entirely different. He began to notice the small details about her, how her laughter lit up a room, how her ambition reminded him of his younger self. At least, that's how he justified it. In reality, John's interest in Emma was crossing a line he knew should never be crossed. John, emboldened by Emma's trust, began pushing boundaries further. He started inviting her to his office after hours, under the pretense of discussing her college applications. Once, he gave her a book he said reminded him of her, a gift, because you're special, he'd explained. The gesture left Emma conflicted. She felt flattered but uneasy, sensing that their relationship was moving into territory she didn't fully understand. Yet, she didn't question it. After all, this was John Williams, the principal, the man everyone admired. How could anything about their connection be wrong? But things were wrong, very wrong. And while Emma couldn't see it, others were beginning to notice. Teachers whispered about how often Emma was seen in his office. Students joked about her being the teacher's favorite. And while nothing seemed overt, the cracks in John's facade were starting to show. For now, his secret was safe. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of coming to light. What started as messages about school projects soon became late-night texts filled with compliments and questions about her personal life. "How was your day?" he'd ask. Or, "You look stressed today, are you okay?" Emma, flattered by the attention, responded without hesitation. She had no reason to doubt his intentions. But John knew exactly what he was doing. The late-night messages were his way of breaking down barriers, of creating a connection that felt intimate and exclusive. Emma was no longer just a student. She was becoming the center of his attention, and she didn't realize how dangerous that was. One evening, he texted her something that made her pause. "I feel like I can talk to you about anything, Emma. You're not like anyone else." The words felt heavy, charged with a meaning Emma couldn't quite grasp. She didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. But John didn't stop. Over the next few days, his texts became more suggestive, more probing. Do you ever feel like people don't understand you? Do you ever feel like you can't be yourself around others? You can always talk to me. I'll never judge you. Emma, vulnerable and seeking validation, started to open up. She told him about her struggles, her fears, her dreams. And John listened, always with the same calm, reassuring tone. He made her feel seen in a way that no one else had. But behind his kind words was a man who was slowly, methodically isolating her from everyone else. He encouraged her to keep their conversations private, warning her that people wouldn't understand their connection. People are quick to judge, he'd say. They don't see what I see in you. Emma believed him. She trusted him. And that trust became the foundation of a relationship that would spiral into something far darker than she could have imagined. And while nothing seemed overt, the cracks in John's facade were starting to show. For now, his secret was safe. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of coming to light. The first time Emma realized something might be wrong, it was too late. She had become so accustomed to John's attention, his compliments, and his reassurances that she barely noticed how much he had begun to dominate her thoughts. But then there were moments, quiet, fleeting ones, when his words felt heavier than they should, when his actions lingered just a second too long. It happened during one of their late meetings. The school was empty, the halls dark, save for the dim light spilling from John's office. Emma sat across from him, the stack of college essays between them barely touched. He had leaned forward, his voice low, telling her how much she reminded him of himself when he was younger, driven, passionate, misunderstood. You're special, Emma, he said. You're not like the others. Emma froze. There was something in the way he said it, something that made her pulse quicken. She forced a smile, brushing it off as another one of his overly sentimental compliments. But the words stayed with her long after she left his office that night. John, however, didn't seem to notice her hesitation, or if he did, he didn't care. To him, this was all part of the plan. He had spent months weaving a narrative, positioning himself as her confidant, her protector. He had invested too much to let doubt or fear derail him now. The turning point came when Emma confided in him about a fight she'd had with her mother. It was a typical teenage argument. Emma wanted more freedom. Her mother, still grieving the loss of her husband, was reluctant to let go. But John seized the opportunity, framing himself as the understanding adult Emma so desperately craved. You deserve to be treated like an adult, he told her. Your mom just doesn't see how amazing you are. But I do. Those words broke something in Emma, a fragile thread tethering her to reality. She began to pull away from her friends, spending more time in John's office, texting him late into the night. She didn't see how he was isolating her, how he was controlling her without ever raising his voice or making a demand. And then, it escalated. John invited her to his home under the pretense of helping her prepare for a scholarship interview. His wife and children were out of town, he explained, and it would be quieter there. Emma hesitated but agreed, convincing herself it was just another act of kindness from the man who had done so much for her. When she arrived, the atmosphere was different. The house was warm and inviting, but it felt too personal, too intimate. John greeted her with a smile, offering her something to drink before leading her to the living room. They talked about her goals, her future, but there was an edge to his tone now, a closeness that made her uncomfortable. At some point, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Emma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment passed quickly, John retreating as though nothing had happened, but the air between them was charged with an unspoken tension. She forced a smile, brushing it off as another one of his overly sentimental compliments. But the words stayed with her long after she left his office that night. John, however, didn't seem to notice her hesitation, or if he did, he didn't care. To him, this was all part of the plan. Emma's life was becoming increasingly complicated. The secrecy, the whispers, and the lingering sense of unease were beginning to weigh on her. She wasn't sure what to make of John's actions anymore. One moment, he seemed like the caring mentor she had always known, and the next, there was something else, something darker she couldn't quite place. For John, The walls were closing in. He was careful, but no amount of caution could stop the inevitable. People were starting to talk, and although he brushed off the rumors as baseless gossip, he knew the risks were growing. The closer he got to Emma, the greater the chance that someone would notice, that someone would expose him for who he truly was. One afternoon, Emma's mother found her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. She glanced at the screen and saw John's name, a text message asking Emma to meet him after school. Her stomach sank. She had always trusted Principal Williams, but this didn't feel right. Why would he be texting her daughter so late at night? When Emma returned home, her mother confronted her. The argument that followed was explosive. Emma, feeling cornered, defended John, insisting that he was only trying to help her. But her mother wasn't convinced. She warned Emma to stay away from him, but the damage had already been done. Emma felt misunderstood, isolated, and even more drawn to the one person she believed was on her side. She was tired of the secrecy, tired of the confusion, and tired of the guilt that gnawed at her every time she looked her mother in the eye. She started to pull back, skipping their meetings and taking longer to reply to his messages. John noticed, and he didn't take it well. His texts became more frequent, more insistent. "Why are you avoiding me?" he wrote one evening. "Have I done something wrong?" Emma didn't know how to respond. She felt trapped, torn between her loyalty to him and the growing realization that something was deeply wrong. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. A teacher, staying late to grade papers, happened to see John and Emma in his office. The door was slightly ajar, and the conversation inside was tense. The teacher couldn't hear everything, but what they did hear was enough to raise alarm. Emma's voice was shaky, pleading, while John's was low and firm. The teacher reported the incident to the school board, and within days, an investigation was launched. John, realizing the noose was tightening, panicked. He told Emma to deny everything, to say that their relationship was strictly professional. "They'll ruin both of us if they find out," he warned her. Emma, terrified and confused, agreed. But the weight of the secret was too much to bear. When she was called in for questioning, she hesitated, her voice trembling as she tried to stick to the story John had given her. But the investigators were persistent. They had uncovered text messages, emails, and witness accounts that painted a chilling picture of their relationship. Emma broke down, tears streaming down her face as she admitted the truth. The fallout was swift and devastating. John was placed on administrative leave, his reputation in shambles. The community was shocked, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster he had become. But for John, the worst was yet to come. Emma's revelation didn't just expose their relationship. It revealed something far darker, something that would lead to a series of events no one could have anticipated. He reached out to her, his voice frantic, begging her to meet him. "You don't understand, Emma," he pleaded in his messages. "We have to get out of here. You're the only one who can fix this." Emma, by now thoroughly frightened by his increasingly erratic behavior, felt cornered once again. She had been through so much, her life in shambles, her future uncertain. And though part of her feared John, another part of her still believed in the man he once seemed to be. But when she agreed to meet him, she had no idea that this would be the last time she would ever see him. They met at a remote spot outside of town. The evening was dark, the moon casting long shadows across the landscape. John was waiting by his car, pacing nervously as Emma approached. She could see the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands trembled when he reached for her. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You know that, right?" Emma, terrified but still holding on to that lingering sense of compassion for the man who had once meant so much to her, nodded slowly. "I don't know what you want from me anymore, John." In that moment, John's demeanor changed. The panic in his eyes transformed into something darker, colder. It was as if, in that brief exchange, he saw her not as a person, but as an obstacle, one he could no longer afford. Before she could react, John lunged toward her, grabbing her by the arm with a force that shocked her. "You don't understand, Emma. I need you to fix this. It's too late for me to fix it myself." Struggling to free herself, Emma realized with chilling clarity that John had no intention of letting her go. The man who had once been her mentor, her protector, had become something unrecognizable, an animal driven by desperation and rage. The struggle didn't last long. By the time Emma's body was found, abandoned in the woods, it was clear what had happened. Her life had been snuffed out by the very person she had trusted most. John's final act, the one that would seal his fate, was the murder of the young girl he had so carefully manipulated and controlled. In a twisted, misguided attempt to hold on to the life he had built, he had taken away the life of the only person who could expose him fully. The investigation into Emma's death was swift, and the evidence pointed directly to John. A manhunt ensued, but by the time they found him, it was too late. John Williams had taken his own life, unable to face the consequences of his monstrous actions. The town of Greenville was left in shock. A life that had seemed perfect, built on trust, respect, and authority, had been shattered by one man's complete and utter disregard for the people he had sworn to protect. The consequences were devastating, but they were nothing compared to the emotional scars left on Emma's mother, on the community, and on the other students who had once looked up to him. In the end, no one could understand why. Why a respected principal would betray everything for a brief moment of control. Why he chose to destroy the life of a young girl who had trusted him above all others. And in the quiet aftermath, all that remained was the haunting question: how many more lives had he destroyed before Emma's? The aftermath of Emma's death rippled through the town of Greenville like a tidal wave, leaving devastation in its wake. The community was torn apart. The loss of a bright young girl, her potential snuffed out so cruelly, was something no one could fully comprehend. But what haunted everyone most was the fact that it had been John Williams, a trusted pillar of their community, who had taken her life. He had been the one who had carefully built the facade of respectability, the one who had convinced everyone he was the person they could turn to for guidance and support. As the weeks passed, the town struggled to move forward. Memorials were held for Emma, and the community rallied around her mother, offering their condolences, but the pain would never truly fade. Emma's death was a tragedy that no one would ever forget. John's legacy, on the other hand, was irrevocably tarnished. Once seen as a respected principal and mentor, he was now nothing more than a cautionary tale, a man whose life had been consumed by darkness, leading him to destroy the very thing he had once cherished. In the end, it wasn't just Emma who had been a victim. The entire town had been affected by John's actions. The students who had admired him, the teachers who had trusted him, and even the parents who had believed he was a force for good, they had all been betrayed. In the wake of such a tragedy, the questions never fully go away. How did a trusted figure, a principal, a man respected by his peers, turn into a predator? How did someone who was supposed to guide and protect young lives instead destroy them with such cruelty? And perhaps most haunting of all, how could the community have missed the signs that something was terribly wrong? We often tell ourselves that evil is something we can easily recognize. It's the villain in a movie, the person with obvious flaws or wicked intentions. But in reality, evil often hides in plain sight. It wears the mask of respectability, of kindness, and even love. It manipulates, controls, and deceives slowly, insidiously, until it's too late to stop. For Emma, the truth of her situation came too late. Her trust, her belief in the mentor who had promised to protect her, was shattered by the very hands that should have guided her. But John Williams wasn't the only one who failed Emma. The system that allowed him to operate unchecked, the community that turned a blind eye to the small cracks in his perfect facade, all of them played a role in the tragedy that followed. In the end, what's left? Emma's memory, her potential, all stolen in an instant. A mother who has to live with the unbearable loss of a daughter taken too soon. And a community that can never truly heal from the betrayal of someone they had once trusted with their children's futures. As we reflect on what happened here, we have to ask ourselves, how can we protect the vulnerable from those who would exploit them? How can we ensure that no child, no parent ever has to experience the horror of being deceived by someone who was supposed to be their protector? And perhaps most importantly, how do we move forward? In the face of such darkness, is it possible to rebuild the trust that has been shattered? Can the people of Greenville and others who may be facing similar horrors ever find a way to heal the wounds left behind? These are the questions that linger long after the story ends, and perhaps they're the questions that can guide us to a future where we are more aware, more vigilant, and more willing to confront the evil that often lurks in places we least expect. Thank you so much for watching and supporting True Crime Stories with me. Your continued support through likes, shares, and comments means everything to us. It's because of you that we can keep this channel alive and share these important stories. To our loyal subscribers, we're incredibly grateful to have you as part of this growing community. Your encouragement fuels our passion to bring you more compelling and thought-provoking content. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to join us. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We've got even more gripping stories coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one. Have a story you'd like us to cover? We'd love to hear from you. Send it to the email address listed on our channel, and your submission might just be featured in an upcoming episode. Thank you once again for being part of this journey. Together, we're shedding light on stories that matter. See you in the next video.